各位好，接下来的这个圆桌呢，我们是因为我们的一位中文的演讲嘉宾呢，因为他个人这个今天身体不良，所以呢不能参加，所以我们接下来的这个圆桌都是会用英文，所以大家如果说需要这个翻译的话，扫码来听一下。那我们现在这个圆桌就开始了。Welcome, first of all. Our topic is about the future of the streaming and how to utilize the international market tools and channels to maximize our revenues for artists and organizations. First of all, please introduce yourself, about your background and your position in this market.
Hello everybody, my name is Jeffrey Chiang. Originally from the US, but I am working in Korea for global distribution. We handle a lot of K-pop that you might hear on music streaming services.
Hey everyone, I'm Max. I work for Secretly Group, which is an American record label owning 3 different record labels, Jaguar, Dead Ocean, and Secret Canadian. I'm from London, but I moved to Sydney 3 years ago. I'm the only employee in APAC. I look after all of our artists across the region. Our artists include Phoebe Bridges, Mitski, Bon Iver, Slowdive, Yes, and a bunch of others. APAC for us traditionally has meant kind of Australia, New Zealand, Japan and Korea, but increasingly in the last few years is expanding to include China, Southeast Asia and India as well.
You know, in China now, it's very rare for Chinese artists and record labels to actual practices in the international market because the language, because of the barriers of these tools. And can you give us some insights about what the picture that you look and what kind of a standpoint that you stand for the people and the parties that you represent?
So yeah, I think in Korea it's actually kind of similar in that our music content is not English speaking, it's mainly in Korean. And so that kind of can have challenges going overseas. So I just think for us it's about just being present, being in as many places that are accessible by everybody as much as possible. And from there you can see the information to find out where you can connect to people around the world.
Yeah, and I mean, we have the same kind of problem in reverse. Like, I'm working with a lot of American and British artists and trying to work them in Asian countries, like China, like Japan, and again, the language barrier is a big thing. And it's about trying to make sure you're just making as much localized content as possible in these territories, and not just bringing in the stuff you're doing in the US and the UK. You're making sure you're adapting everything you're doing to the specific market, language, and audience in each country.
You know, for Chinese artists and record labels, it's very frustrating. Seldom get enough revenues or enough knowledge about the rules of the market. Can you give us your own experiences in this market, especially in the APAC region?
In terms of the rules in China for foreign artists, or?
In China.
Yeah,
the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big differences we see is kind of reporting from DSPs. I think I work primarily in marketing, and a lot of what we do is dependent on data we get back from DSPs like Spotify and Apple. That's pretty instant information. I think it's very different here and in a lot of other Asian countries like Korea as well, actually, where the information you're getting back doesn't come instantly. It is quite different, and that's definitely something we've had to get used to when we market in these countries and not having that constant stream of information. But yeah, I think you probably deal with similar things in Korea as well, right?
Yeah, I think pretty much it depends on kind of where your business is at. I think a lot of people when they start and they make some music and they want to put it out there and they think, oh, I'm going to put it on Spotify, Apple, or whatever service, and they kind of want some kind of big global like wow effect, like I'm a global sensation, and that's usually like very, very like 0.001% that you might be that lucky artist that happens. Instead, it's like I think what's important is realizing that every country is different. So even, Korea being close to China, very different territories. Japan being close geographically, very different territories. And each territory will have its own kind of approach, what the people will connect to. And I think being able to focus in on, what your strong points are, and then slowly expanding, you eventually will be able to get to that, like, oh, you're a global sensation, or you're there. But usually it's really just like starting and doing it just like one after the other, sort of knowing your territory, and then just continuing that, and then building and expanding on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, we both work for, I work for an indie label and you work for an independent distributor, and we don't have kind of the same resources that like a major label would have, where you have teams in all of these countries. It's very much when something pops its head up, you see something's reacting in a specific market, then you can dive in and go all in and try and maximize potential there, but it's definitely step by step, as you said.
One more question about, especially on the Korean market. We know that Korea as a country is not a big country, but we have so many artists in Korea and outside of the Korea in the international market. And we know during the past 2 decades, there will be the golden age for Korean music globally, and from the Psy to BTS to Blackpink, etc. What do you see these opportunities come up, and what offers for the Korean artists and the record labels for these opportunities?
So yeah, I think this is something that we kind of spoke about like before the session. Like in Korea, I think there's a lot of course, luck. I think in Korea, the government as well has a lot of support for exporting Korean culture. And so being part of the culture, Korean music is just one part of it. But in total, there's K-fashion, makeup, skincare, dramas. There's a whole kind of entertainment sector that is all kind of coming out together. And because there's so many touch points that someone can connect to it, if someone is like, oh, I like, the hip hop dance or this drama, they're inevitably going to be listening to music, or they're going to see like the skincare or fashion styles. And so I think like having those all together, and of course some luck, like Psy, 10 years ago going viral, nobody expected that, but it just happened. So it was very, very lucky. And then from that, it's, with all the other things that are happening, you can get like BTS happening, movies like Parasite, getting some hits, and then now Blackpink. It all kind of builds on top of each other when there was opportunity to take advantage of that. But the key here, I think, is, for Korea, I don't believe it would have been as successful if they didn't, have that amount of, culture and exporting of the culture all together, not just music, but everything all together, and then utilizing that as an opportunity.
But there absolutely will be a lot of smaller artists and the record labels. They look for the similar.
Of course, and so it definitely has like a top-down effect. Not everybody is BTS, of course, but because of Psy and BTS, when people think of or look at K-pop, it's a different image, right? Like when you look at certain things, like cultural things from other countries, like let's say Japan, they have animation and like comic books. People around the world might view it differently. Oh, they might, he's like a nerd or something, or like otaku, people might know. But the image has been kind of changing. And so it's kind of the same thing, like people who are into K-pop and K-pop music or Korean music who are not Asian, it's might have been not cool before, but it's kind of become mainstream that it's kind of okay. And so when a Korean artist that's indie or not as big tries to go overseas or tries to connect, people are much more open to giving it a chance.
We have American and British artists who are looking to break into Korea, and they've done collaborations with Korean artists who are a lot smaller than kind of these big K-pop artists. We've an artist called Japanese Breakfast who collaborated with Soyun from say Sonyeon, which is like it's a big band, and they're K-indie, it's definitely not K-pop. But I think from that, she managed to expand her fan base in Korea like pretty significantly. And then like 6 months later, she was at the Grammys and had a picture with the BTS guys. Like, and I think definitely it's not just because of that, but I think there are these kind of stepping stones you can take as a smaller artist that will help you reach those levels in not just Korea, like other countries as well.
We noticed for those examples, big examples, IPs like Psy or BTS or Blackpink, they all used quite similar elements like dancing and music videos and this kind of very not quite Korean style, but it feels like Korean, but it feels very international. So this remind me about those international artists, not about the British ones. I mean, for most of the American ones and Latin Americans, they use dancing, they use this kind of entertaining art styles. What you see is this kind of art styles very necessary for music artists to utilize, to actually to practice, to enter into this international market, because it's very obvious.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think on that, and especially for like Korean music, and just how people are these days, like, you know, even now people are on their phone. Everything is very visual, and so even though music at its core is audio, like, you know, you listen with your ears, there's an element to, you want to engage your fan with multiple different senses. And so a visual element is always helpful. I don't think it's necessarily necessary, right? If you have a very, very amazing song and people can connect to it, you know, just by listening to it, they can feel the emotions. I think that is good. That is good enough. But in general, you know, if you want to give yourself the best chance, like, I think having those other elements on your side is a benefit. It's a plus.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any artists on our roster who are gonna do a dance or anything, or do a TikTok dance, unfortunately, as much as we might want them to do. But like, I think, as you said, there's other things you can do to supplement that, like having a strong visual world, like being able to create really engaging short form content that doesn't have to be a song and a dance. It can be talking to camera. It can be like based on your personality or something else. Like, I don't think it has to necessarily exist in that glossy, high-end pop space all the time. And you know, we have artists who are massively popular now. Like Xiaowei is probably a good example. Like, she's kind of an Icelandic singer who makes her music in the classical world, and she's not doing dances or anything, and she's kind of as big as in Asia in particular as a lot of these like massive pop stars. So it's definitely not a necessity, but like there are things you can do to replace that.
Like, so yeah, on that specific for Xiaowei, it's, you know, in Korea it's very popular actually, and so, you know, as Korea, where K-pop is from, where there is visual, like a lot of the fans also like to connect to like ballad singers or someone who has a really, really unique voice, and you know, that also really does well. And there's no singing or dancing. There's no kind of flashy anything. It's kind of the story and the emotion. And if you can achieve that, you know, that can also work as well.
You also mentioned about the cultural origin of this music into other kind of cultural elements. Just as you formerly mentioned about the drummers, what do you think if the music artists or artist groups, they want to enter into an international market, just as the past ones we discussed about, even many traditional ones, they want to enter this market. Do you think they need to merge into other art forms or cultural elements?
I think, just to make things a little clear too, it has to fit your like business, your identity, right? Like, just because, you know, getting your song on a drama can work and it's very successful, it doesn't mean that's necessarily the right path to do. And so, you know, when you look at kind of what your business is doing and the artist, what they want to do and where they connect, you just have to identify that and then find the people that connect in that way, because that's going to be your fan base. If you try to force yourself into, you know, either doing the dances or trying to get on some TV show, but that's just not the right fan that you're connecting to, then it's all for nothing. Then it's kind of almost a waste of your energy and your resources. And so I think it's just really important to be able to evaluate, pick and choose where to spend your time, and then pursue that as the direction you're going to go in and explore opportunities in there.
yeah, I think you'll alienate your core fan base pretty quickly if you pivot to fit a trend or to try and sound more international or anything like that. And at the end of the day, it's your core fan base who are going to be there for you in the long term. Like, maybe you might get some short-term success off the back of that, but you're not building anything sustainable or authentic or something that's going to keep going over many years. Like, I think you've got to stay true to who you are as an artist. And like, sometimes maybe that does mean your audience is a bit more limited than other sounds, but like, there's so much you can do within that space and engage like way more heavily with those fans. And it's kind of like this idea of like a super fan that might be way more excited and invested in the long term and put more money into it than just like a casual fan who's there for a bit.
And I think just something I'm not sure if people always keep in mind, because everyone's always like looking up really, really high, looking at like, oh, this many listeners, this many followers. If you think about it, for an artist, if you can get like just 10,000 fans, 20,000 fans that are very dedicated to you, as an artist, you can have a very successful career off that. Like and not just like just getting by. Like with that many fans that are willing to come see you, listen to your music, like engage with you in your artistic world, you can be very successful with just that small number. It's not impressive. It's not 10 million, 1 billion views, but you can still be very, very successful and happy, and then just continue to grow. So I think like just keeping in mind that perspective is also very important when you want to like set goals for yourself. Like saying, oh, I want to get 1 billion views in a month. You're gonna feel very, very sad when you don't hit that mark. But if you set reasonable expectations, then it's I think it's much easier to continue going.
I think for most of the artists and the record labels, rights holders, most of the time they see their plays is just the tens or hundreds. It's very frustrating because they even upload those songs and soundtracks into all the international platforms like Spotify, Apple, but still the play is still the hundreds. So it's how actually get the bottleneck break down.
I think like something we try to do across DSPs in all territories where we're kind of engaging seriously is just make sure you have a good relationship with the team. And I think that starts at like a really basic level, like doing their best practices, like kind of uploading how they tell you to upload, pitching how they tell you to pitch, engaging with new features like Spotify will introduce like their new clips feature, which is like kind of a short form video on their page. If you're doing that and then you can tell their team that you're doing that, that's like a start to kind of get their attention. You can form better relationships with their teams, like not just a kind of the operations side, but also like the editorial side, the pitching, and then you can start to kind of be in contention for these playlists that other people are. I think if Spotify and Apple Music and all these international DSPs are receiving thousands. I used to work in Apple Music in the UK actually, and we'd receive just from the UK 1,000 pitches a week for different songs, and there were 4 people on the editorial team. So you can't really get through everything, and one way of knocking a bunch off is if someone didn't do the pitch right. Great, we'll knock that off this week, we'll just look at the 600 that are left. And I think that's how you start to see smaller international artists getting playlisted, because they're doing the right thing that each individual team wants. And it is time consuming, and it's different in every territory, and maybe it's not something you can do for every single DSP in every single country. But if you know, as we said earlier, like where you want to focus and you've kind of decided that already, then you can kind of superset that and start to build that relationship with their teams, and you can then start to see, I think, some success down the line.
And I think on top of that point, I think people should like remember that like the stream, the number that you see, that's like the last stop. It's how you get the person from where they are to that place is kind of important. That's where marketing and all those campaigns that you run are very important. So it's how you focus it. A lot of the times you want to, when you do your promotion or when you have an album, you want people to know you as an artist more. You want people to know, your songs more. But if your goal is to try to increase listenings, your efforts need to be towards pushing people to listen to the song as opposed to trying to expose yourself as an artist, right? So if you can slowly continue doing that, doing the marketing, getting to know the team really well on each platform, and then when you release guiding as many people, you will see kind of growth. It'll be steady and slow, but over time, 1% of 100 is just one person, but 1% of a million, that's just a lot of people. So it gets exponentially faster, like as you get bigger.
As for those artists who actually want to get into this international market, for the streams, usually people will spend some time to interact with those people who comment on these soundtracks or following them. This is very time-consuming, and we will cost the artists themselves sometimes to understand about how people react to their songs and artworks. Is that the same with the foreign artists in the same market?
Like foreign artists trying to come to Asia, you mean?
Yes, right.
Yeah, I think, again, like I was going to say earlier, like we'll have artists that are huge in the US and the UK, and then their manager will go, oh wow, we only got like 500 streams in China. And it's like, did you try to do anything in China beyond just doing a pitch? I think there's so much more beyond just like what we're talking about here with DSPs. There's so much, and like socials and stuff, there's so much you can try and do. I think maybe Japan's a good example. Like when I'm trying to introduce an artist to Japan, I'll make sure we get like an interview and some press that like will make sure they put their name in katakana so people can actually search for the artists on Twitter and stuff in that language. Because if you're just doing English interviews and English language stuff, you're not providing any context or content for a local Japanese audience. And that goes the same for all these different countries, which can be overwhelming because there are so many different countries with different languages. But that's why you kind of have to try and be selective about it. And I think, like maybe if you're like a Chinese artist, you're like, I want to break the UK or the US, like maybe that's not the most productive place to start. I mean, the US is a massive country with like so many different scenes across there. Maybe you can go, I'm like a math rock band and I see this cool scene in like Charlottesville or like, Chicago, and I'm going to reach out to some artists there and try and do some collaborations and see what kind of local zines there are and try and get some interviews with them. I think that's like a better way to start there and build it out rather than going, I need to get some pitchfork coverage and get some like big US thing. I think you can be way more selective about it and then build it out rather than just trying to have this macro view of like, because that gets overwhelming for anyone. But it's the same in reverse coming here.
Okay. I think for these for Chinese artists, they always are very curious about how actually they can get international followers. So in terms of this, we can't avoid talking about the TikTok and YouTube, right? Because this is very visual, and you can even live streaming your performance or your tours. And what about this ecosystem? Artists, Korean artists always do this kind of live streaming and also the interaction with their listeners.
So I think the one thing that's critical here is to understand, like, when you see an idol, doing their TikTok, they're streaming on this platform, they're posting on this other platform, they have a huge team behind them. Sometimes there are people who are posting, like if you are doing it all by yourself, it's impossible, right? You will drive yourself crazy. And so I think realizing that, and then as Matt was saying, being selective about how you reach people, I think that's like the most important. In Korea, streaming is very, very popular. So there's a harder push for that now. But for regular artists, not many of them do it because it's too time consuming. They either don't have like the skills, they don't know how to set up the technical thing. So at that point, it's like you need to really do what you do. You need to like learn about things, but you just really should focus in on doing what is most productive for you.
We have like very, very few of our artists are on TikTok. Like, if we can advise them, it's like best practice, but like a lot of them don't want to do it, and that's totally fine. That's kind of our job to find other avenues to promote that artist, but we have a lot of artist songs who will go viral on TikTok for one reason or another. Then an artist might choose to engage. Honestly, for us, a lot of the time they still don't. But we don't find TikTok as useful a tool like, for artists necessarily as it is like for using songs on other people's content, maybe that goes viral. But like, I think we've had a few viral tracks in the last few years. We didn't create any of them. It's all completely organic, and I think anyone who tries to pretend that they've managed to artificially create a big viral TikTok trend is lying through their teeth, or they have millions and millions of dollars. Like, I think it's pretty difficult to do that.
And just one thing also I forgot to mention too, though, if TikTok or YouTube is your kind of avenue that you want to pursue, I can say that the services, they definitely like to look at artists that are actively using their tools. So that doesn't mean like, oh, I just uploaded a video. Like there are a lot of different like buttons and subscriptions, premieres. There's a lot of different tools, and the artists that engage and fully utilize that tool, they're much more receptive to working with you as mentioned before. When you get to network with people at the services, they like to see that. And if you are doing that and you go approach them, say, hey, we have some release, or we want to put this out, they're much more open to seeing an artist that is kind of understanding the whole ecosystem versus someone who doesn't have any activity, but then all of a sudden, why are they reaching out like to try to get some like playlisting or some feature in some new release section? So if that's where you want to go, definitely explore it to the end of what you can do on that level.
Yes, actually we have more territories in the internet world, in the streaming world to explore. Actually, in the past, it's very impossible for you to know about these territories, except that a specific vinyl store or some stores that the boss is very knowledgeable about this Chinese music or something. But nowadays, it's a completely different scenario, right? And we can tell from a lot of international DSPs reports that there was some data very important for you to analyze how to do the marketing or how to do the campaign in these territories. Can you share some of the insights and what are the very valuable data that you think that's worth mentioning?
Yeah, I mean, we use data for kind of every stage of the marketing process. Like before we start a campaign, we'll set our budgets almost entirely based on kind of top countries on Spotify and all the other DSPs, and kind of things might have changed since your last album, and that can be reflected. Like it might not be something you're immediately seeing in the moment, but over time, like I think Phoebe Bridgers is a good example. Like when we put out the last album, Indonesia wasn't in the top 10 territories. We had a quick check yesterday, and Indonesia's just about to become #1, and that's just very gradual over time, ticking up like that. So it's not necessarily big spikes, but also you can occasionally see big spikes. We had an artist called Mitski who released a song last year called My Love, Mine or Mine. We were kind of mainly focusing on the US and UK at the time, because that's where she was touring and that was kind of the focus. But immediately, there was a TikTok trend that was completely not launched by us that started in Indonesia and the Philippines, and we just saw literally over one weekend the streams kind of go up 5 or 6-fold in a few days in Indonesia and the Philippines. So and that was because Spotify and Apple provide kind of every 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 day delay, real-time data. So we could see that immediately, and I very quickly kind of put together a team in those countries and started servicing it as if it was kind of a brand new song. And that went on for 5 or 6 months, and I think the song ended up #2 on Billboard charts in Indonesia and the Philippines, top 10 in Malaysia and Singapore, so kind of spread across the rest of the region as well. But without that data, we wouldn't have known to do any of that. And we use that data, feeding that back to everyone else in the region, to radio, to press, to the DSPs as well. We were kind of updating Spotify every day on what we were seeing in different countries and in their countries. So data is super, super valuable for kind of everything we're doing.
Yeah, the way that we kind of looking at it, of course, having more data is good. Maybe having too much data can sometimes be a little bit troubling, but the benefit and the takeaway is the data gives you direction, or it gives you at least a hint of a direction. It doesn't always mean, oh, if I do this, because the data shows that it's going to be successful, but it's better than just, taking a chance and just going in one direction and hoping it works. And so, utilizing data or data-driven like strategy is very, very helpful, and then you adapt along the way. Like after that, data may or may not be helpful, but it gives you that kind of guidance for where to go, and then you can decide from there.
One question about very specific data. For example, I always see from the reports that a specific soundtrack had 500 or 1,000 different listeners in this region. And you will be very curious about who are these 500 or 1,000 people. And if you have these kind of data in hand, what kind of next step are you suggesting these record labels or artists to take for the next stage?
I think like some data piece like that can tell you lots of very different things. If you have 1,000 unique listeners, but then you only have like 1,200 streams, that means everyone's kind of only listened once or maybe twice. That means maybe, as you were saying, like I think you can, if there's too much data, sometimes you can be tricked by it. And I think, but when you have stuff like that, you can use it in combination. You can go like, okay, that's probably because it's been on a playlist. So it's not like there are actual fans here necessarily yet. It's like a good indicator, but it's not really something you should move on. However, if you have like 1,000 unique listeners and you have 10,000 streams on a song, that means every one of those listeners has listened 10 times. And if you can isolate that to a specific region, you can go, okay, this is really resonating with people who live there. Let's dive in a bit more. So I think that's like you can use data in combination with other pieces to kind of get a better sense. But also Spotify now lets you target those listeners as well. I think it's, as you said, like you can get that and it's just like an anonymous piece of data, but I think DSPs are increasingly allowing you to target those listeners and be a bit more proactive in advertising to them and serving them more content. So that might be something that changes in the future on other DSPs as well.
I sometimes met with the Chinese record labels, some rights holders. They have several hundred soundtracks from dozens of artists, independent artists, and they don't know how to optimize their licensing deals with DSPs or these agencies. So what will be the basic suggestions for you to give to these record labels who have several hundred soundtracks? Because it's very important for them. Because most of the time, several hundred soundtracks may be very small. Because every year it's about 100 million songs worldwide. But you have several hundred soundtracks. You spend these artists have spent so much time on that. And you want these artists to get revenues, to get known by the audiences. So what will be your suggestions to give to them with the licensing deals?
That's also the case in Korea as well. The regular kind of artist is in the same way. They're just getting hundreds of songs or listens a year. But the reality is that when you want to kind of negotiate with a music service, like even the biggest, it's tough. Like even for us, like we represent like a large amount of Korean music, and K-pop is popular. But even for us, we're not gonna be able to force change at the service. If the service doesn't want to do anything about it, there's really not much we can do. And so it's not really like a plug for it, but coming together, like I guess independently, that one label, they have like a couple handful of artists with a handful of songs, but then there's another label that also, when you combine them all together, collectively, you have some more power that you can kind of use to get better kind of deal terms or try to make some changes. But short of that, even getting in the room to discuss with a music label as an independent, it's just very, very difficult. And so, I mean, that's why there are services like Kanjian who are doing this one that can assist with that first step. And then once you're in the ecosystem, you learn more about it and you grow, you may be able to make the next step to do it yourself. And it's all like a step-by-step process that I think you cannot skip. Like, if you get to the point where you're big, it's only because you've had that experience and the time networking with the services through whomever your partners are, that you can eventually grow to do something more, but you cannot just jump. That I think would be a disservice to your business and your artist.
I mean, Secretly is one of the biggest indies in the US, but we couldn't do direct deals with all of these DSPs. Like we're in Merlin, along with Fluxus, and we, there's hundreds of labels and distributors, and we use collective bargaining to kind of get the best deals possible. Like I just think it's unrealistic to think you'd be able to go do it yourself and get like a deal that's fair for your artist. I think it's always best to kind of come together and work as a collective.
Currently, those deals and after the deals, all the reports are automatically digitalized, or still depending on a lot of manpower and staff working.
I mean, for us in the beginning, yeah, we literally had part-time people, looking at all the data, manually putting in Excel spreadsheet, very, very manual. But then as we were able to grow, of course, we started to develop our own customized systems to automatically, parse the information, the data, put it into a way that we can look at it easily. And it was in this process, understanding what was the issues and then creating some tools to fix it. And we can, go from there. It's step by step.
So it's the same with the Merlin things, right?
Yeah, I think each label and distributor uses their own systems and stuff, but yeah, I think it's pretty similar.
Last question is about for the Asia Pacific market is a very broad geographical territories, and but in a way we share quite similar business rules, but China is quite exceptional because in terms of the TikTok handling is quite a totally different ecosystem, and QQ regarding Spotify is totally with the barrier. So in terms of this kind of a special kind of a barrier and isolated market, what do you think would be the best way for the international artists to come into this special market? Because I believe that you are also looking for some partners and some channels in China too. But China, not very easy for you guys to understand. So what's your concerns, or what's your doubts about this market?
Well, I mean, I think the same questions that I guess people that are working in China might have about Korea or going to Australia or overseas. We have the same kind of questions and investigations towards China. Like, we have to do our research, we have to try to understand, and we want to try to connect and network with people. And so that's why even like coming to events like this, for us, like, we want to be able to meet with as many people as well, just to be able to share information and to get a better understanding and find opportunities. And so at least for us, that's kind of how we've been approaching it. We've been trying to build a network, so we know people at services that we can talk with, and then we would try to attend these kinds of events where we can get to know more people, and then slowly and surely we just try to apply what we have been doing in other countries, and then make the adjustment for what we feel might work best for China under advisement and guidance from people that we know here in the territory, and go from there.
Yeah, I think, because as you said, it's such a different market. It's a very expensive one for labels to break into as well. It's a lot of upfront cost in things like setting up artist profiles, because we can't, no one on the team can speak Mandarin, and we don't know how to use these systems like Douyin and stuff like that. So we have to kind of pay people on the ground to do that. And then I think if you're not already seeing revenue coming in from China, it's hard to justify the initial upfront expense. And I think that's a lot to do with, like, there's less of a physical market here, so you don't have that regular inflows through, like, you're digital only, but we kind of, most of our markets, especially in Europe, are kind of majority physical, and that kind of has like a bit more of a steady income stream than digital. And I think when DSPs here the reporting's not quite as good as the global DSPs, then it kind of gets quite hard to see what the outcome of spending that much money up front is going to be. However, I think like it is just like you have to try and do it and see what happens. I think Beggars are another independent label group, and they did a really good job 10 plus years ago coming in and just really investing very early in the market, and like I think they had to pour a lot of money into it, but now they're set up and they're in quite a good position here. Not every label is in the same position to be able to do that, but I'm hoping kind of in the next 5 years we'll see more and more labels getting interested in coming to things like this and meeting local people and finding ways to make it work.
Yeah, I believe that they already have many examples that for foreigners, for the Korean artists, they have been quite famous before they actually know that. And when they come to China, they know that they have thousands of people waiting for them to perform, and very exciting. And even, yeah, I think this is the information that between them. So my last question, very last my question, is that nowadays these streaming platforms begin, even including TikTok, they are actually making deals directly with these artists and skip those agencies and their organizations. What will be the future of that? Is that the trend, or is that because each of them they have a standpoint and reasons for that? But actually, we need to believe in something, and
so I think, like, you know, as we told before, especially for the independents, you know, our weakness is that we are independent, we are separate, and so I think, you know, this is just my personal opinion, but you know, I feel like the approach to kind of break that up is to divide, and that's why a music service like TikTok in the US, like they want to spend the time to give those direct deals, and individually, like I said before, there's not much you can do. You cannot negotiate the agreement, like, and you individually, if they lose you, like they're like, oh, you're not on the service, it's not a big deal for them. They were totally okay to let Universal go, you know, for however months, and then Universal finally came back to the table. So I think, like, before, the music services, they wanted to get the content on their service. And it was too frustrating to be able to go one by one to get all that content. But that was like 5-10 years ago. Now they have the content. Now they have the content. They don't need, you know, someone to bring it in. So now they can try to chop it up and streamline it. And so I kind of feel that, unfortunately, is not good for the independent sector. But I feel that there will be a tightening of music services overall. I know some music services are not taking like things like yoga music, meditation music. They're rejecting it. They won't take it on their service. And so I think they're gonna start to look at the data on their end, what songs are performing the best, and then like if there's gonna be some threshold, they're gonna start to try to trim. And I think there's just gonna be we're at the point where they're gonna start trimming things out, and so I don't know if that'll be a good or bad thing, but it's definitely going to be tougher for the independent sector as a whole.
I think you mentioned about the content. Is that because of those yoga music is not funded to those artists, art forms, but more with the copyrights only things?
It's a mixture of all of those things. It's like, you know, whether there's difficulty in, you know, from copyrights, or, you know, just identifying the tracks, or just performance based. Or I mean, we haven't touched on it, but of course, like, is it human? Is it AI? You can't really know. And so for music services, I think they are just saying, oh, it's too frustrating or too much trouble. We're just gonna remove the problem and then go for it.
How about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I just think, to your point of like, will we see more direct deals in the future, like carving out individual labels and distributors? I mean, I hope not. I think like it would really be in all of our best interests, like including the new labels here, to like stick together and be more present as like a united front. Yeah, I mean, like what TikTok stuff recently is super controversial, and that's still ongoing, and obviously every business kind of has to do what's best for them and their artists, but I hope it will become like a trend moving forward, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, yes, because TikTok doing they are setting up examples for those independent artists doing this direct deals with them and make them successful, and to make people believe that it's a trend. But I personally also believe that if you lose these professional people, professional team working on these campaigns, marketing and analyze for these artists, and even those are legal, consulting services for them, they will be, tiny and unimportant no matter how the soundtrack is popular in their certain platforms. You yourself as an artist will be quite tiny with no bargaining power with these platforms. Thank you very much, and it's very.
Thank you.
Thank you. 谢谢，我们今天这个讨论非常的有启发。然后我想就是因为他们两位也是除了他们代理这个相应的这些艺术家在全球的市场，其实他们也在寻求在来中国能够进入到中国和跟中国的艺术家和机构合作，也包括一些渠道。所以我觉得各位如果说在这方面有合作的这个需求的话，我觉得也是非常乐意的介绍他们两位给大家认识。今天这次圆桌就到这里，大家可以进入午餐时间了。Thank you very much.